Do you really want to go and live in that hotel for the winter?
Sure I do. It'll be lots of fun.
The hospital scene from The Shining was so disturbing that Stanley Kubrick personally destroyed it just days after release. Why? Because it revealed a secret so dark that test audiences couldn't sleep for days. Now, 45 years later, the truth is finally out. From the scrapbook of horrors to the rotting woman in the bathtub, these are the scenes Kubrick never wanted you to know about. Stanley Kubrick wasn't just looking to make another movie. He was chasing something deeper. After Barry Lyndon failed to make a profit, Kubrick knew he needed a film that would hit harder. So, at 38, he made a bold decision. He wanted to create the scariest movie ever made. But this wasn't just about money. Kubrick had grown up afraid of everything, from shadows to silence. And he wanted to turn those fears into something powerful. He started searching. His team brought him piles of horror books, and one by one, he tossed them aside. The sound of books hitting the wall became so common, it was almost like a routine. Until one day, that sound stopped. His secretary found him silently reading The Shining by Stephen King. This one was different. Kubrick didn't throw it away. He kept turning the pages, completely locked in. That moment was the beginning of The Shining, a movie that would haunt generations. What drew Kubrick in wasn't just the ghosts or the creepy hotel. It was Jack Torrance, a man slowly losing his mind, a father who becomes a threat to his own family. The horror wasn't just in the setting, it was inside the character's head. That's what Kubrick loved. He didn't care for jump scares. He wanted slow, quiet madness, something that creeps up on you. When Warner Brothers sent him the manuscript in 1977, Kubrick actually read the entire thing. That alone was rare for him. He found the structure sharp, the story loaded with psychological tension. But when Stephen King sent in his version of the script, Kubrick rejected it. He thought it was too simple, too literal, so he brought in novelist Diane Johnson. She wasn't a fan of King's book either, but that's exactly why Kubrick picked her. Together, they rewrote the story. They stripped away the parts they didn't like and focused on what truly scared them: isolation, madness, and losing control. But before the movie even started filming, there was already a real story behind the story. In 1974, King and his wife stayed at the Stanley Hotel in Colorado. They were the only guests. The place was shutting down for the season. Decades earlier, a housekeeper had been nearly killed there in a gas explosion. Locals said her spirit never left. During his stay, King thought he saw a little boy in the hallway. Later that night, he dreamed that his son was being chased through the hotel by some unseen force. He woke up, lit a cigarette, stared at the mountains outside the window, and by the time the cigarette was finished, the entire story had taken shape in his mind. Kubrick would change many things in the movie. He even changed the room number from 217 to 237. But the eerie spirit of that hotel, the sense of being trapped with something you can't see but can feel, that stayed at the heart of it all. Kubrick's vision for The Shining was shaped long before he ever picked up King's book. Back in the late 1940s, he worked as a photographer for Look magazine. He was just a teenager, but his eye for detail was already razor sharp. He learned how to tell a story with a single image, how lighting and framing could say more than words ever could. That training never left him. When Stanley Kubrick decided to make The Shining, he already had one actor in mind for the lead: Jack Nicholson. He didn't even consider anyone else seriously. But Stephen King, the man who wrote the original novel, hated that idea. He thought Nicholson already looked too crazy from his role in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So the audience would never believe he was just a normal man slowly going insane. King wanted someone like Jon Voight or Martin Sheen, someone who could show that slow breakdown. But the studio didn't care. They told King flat out, Jack is non-negotiable. And even though Nicholson got the part, Kubrick actually had a long list of backups ready. Robert De Niro, Harrison Ford, even Robin Williams were on his mind. But none of them felt right. Nicholson accepted, and the fight between Kubrick and King never really ended. King spent years calling the movie a bad adaptation, even though it became a classic. While that drama was going on, another massive search was happening behind the scenes, this time for a child. Kubrick's assistant, Leon Vitali, was sent on a mission across America to find the perfect boy to play Danny Torrance. He went through more than 5,000 boys over 6 months, traveling through Illinois, Colorado, and Missouri. He interviewed kids, recorded them, and sent tapes back to Kubrick in England. Most were rejected. Then in Chicago, a little boy named Danny Lloyd walked in and said, "Gee, Leon, I like your suit." That moment was all it took. He had something special. Kubrick chose him, and Leon Vitali stayed by his side throughout filming. Not just as a coach, but as a kind of protector. The boy was never told what kind of movie he was really making. He thought it was a drama, not a horror film. But casting didn't stop there. The role of Wendy, Jack's wife, sparked another battle. Jack Nicholson didn't want Shelley Duvall. He pushed for Jessica Lange, who looked more like the strong, brave woman in King's book. But Kubrick wanted something different. He thought Wendy should be weak, broken, and scared from the beginning. That way, the audience would believe she'd stay with someone as dangerous as Jack. Kubrick saw Duvall in the movie 3 Women and was blown away by how vulnerable she looked on screen. That sealed it. But Duvall paid a heavy price. Kubrick pushed her so hard during filming that she started losing her hair, cried constantly, and even collapsed from exhaustion. Her career faded after that. Meanwhile, Jessica Lange went on to win Oscars and become a TV icon. The decision changed both their lives forever. There was one more casting twist that nearly changed the tone of the movie completely. The hotel's cook, Dick Hallorann, was almost played by Slim Pickens, the cowboy actor from Dr. Strangelove. At first, he was interested, but he had one rule: no more than 100 takes per scene. He knew Kubrick's style from the past and didn't want to go through that again. Kubrick refused, of course. He always demanded perfection, even if it took over 100 takes. Pickens walked away. That opened the door for Scatman Crothers, who took the role and gave it everything. He ended up winning an award for it. And looking back, that choice mattered more than people realized. In the book, Hallorann is the only black character. If Pickens had taken the role, it would have erased that detail completely. And then there were the twins, the girls in the hallway who say, "Come play with us, Danny, forever and ever and ever." They weren't even twins in the book. They were just sisters, aged 8 and 10, barely mentioned. But Kubrick had a vision. He wanted them to be identical to make them extra creepy. He cast real-life twins Lisa and Louise Burns, who were 10 years old at the time. The image of them standing side by side in matching dresses became one of the most haunting visuals in horror history. Stanley Kubrick was one of the most powerful directors in Hollywood. Yet when he started working on The Shining, he didn't want to leave his home in England. Even though the story was set in the snowy mountains of Colorado, Kubrick made sure the entire movie was shot in Britain. He lived in a quiet countryside estate in Hertfordshire and refused to travel. So instead of flying to the Rockies, he brought the Rockies to him. Massive sets were built at Elstree Studios just outside London, on the same sound stages where Star Wars had been filmed a year earlier. The inside of the Overlook Hotel wasn't real. It was built piece by piece from Kubrick's imagination, and it didn't make sense on purpose. The maze scene where little Danny escapes in the snow? It wasn't filmed in the cold. That snow, was made from salt and styrofoam, laid out right on the studio floor. Only a few brief outdoor shots were actually filmed in America. The rest was pure illusion, designed to make you feel lost, even if you didn't know why. While the sets were carefully controlled, what happened behind the scenes was much more intense. Kubrick pushed his actors far past the breaking point. The most extreme example came during the scene where Wendy, played by Shelley Duvall, backs away from Jack Nicholson on the stairs, swinging a baseball bat. Kubrick forced Duvall to do that scene over 100 times. Some say it took 127 takes. Others claim it was 148. It broke the record for the most takes ever filmed for a single scene with dialogue. But for Kubrick, that was normal. He believed no take was even worth looking at until they'd done it at least 35 times. Jack Nicholson called it a test, one where you had to give everything and still have the energy to survive. Kubrick even told the crew to ignore Duvall completely, isolating her to get a more panicked performance. He manipulated the mood on set, turning filmmaking into a mental war zone. Nicholson tried to keep up by living wild. He said he'd spend 12 hours filming, then party for 8, and sleep only 4. But strangely, while Kubrick tormented the adults, he did everything he could to protect the child star, 6-year-old Danny Lloyd. The boy had no idea he was even in a horror film. Kubrick told him they were making a family drama. He kept the scary parts secret and used a dummy for scenes that were too intense. Blood? Hidden? Ghosts? Never mentioned. Even when Danny's character was being chased with an axe, Kubrick made sure Lloyd was nowhere near the chaos. Years later, Danny watched the finished movie as a teenager and was shocked. He realized those creepy twins he played with on set were ghosts, and that Jack Nicholson's character had been trying to kill him the whole time. The contrast couldn't be sharper. A woman driven to the edge, and a little boy kept in the dark. Kubrick's obsession wasn't just with acting. It extended to how the film looked. The Shining changed horror forever by using a brand new technology, the Steadicam. This allowed the camera to move smoothly, like a ghost, floating down hallways. The man who invented the Steadicam, Garrett Brown, worked on set to help Kubrick get it right. Those eerie shots of Danny riding his tricycle through the endless halls weren't just creepy, they were revolutionary. The lens could glide inches from walls without shaking, pulling the audience deep into the Overlook Hotel. Kubrick used it not just for show, but to create the feeling that something invisible was always watching. It was a technical masterpiece, and it became the visual heart of the movie's terror. But while the technology soared, Shelley Duvall sank. Her role nearly destroyed her. She had to cry all day, every day, for almost 9 months straight. Her hands were torn open from gripping the bat. Her voice became hoarse from screaming. Her hair started falling out from stress. She listened to sad music between takes, dragging up old traumas just to stay in character. Sometimes she'd collapse on set from pure exhaustion, and it was all captured in behind-the-scenes footage. She later said that knowing she had to cry every Monday morning made her start crying before she even got out of bed. Yet somehow, she kept going. Even Jack Nicholson didn't understand how she did it. When the day was done, Duvall said she actually felt calm. All that pain, let out in front of the camera, left her strangely peaceful at the end of each shoot. When Stanley Kubrick released The Shining in 1980, most people didn't realize something big was missing. Just a few days after it premiered, Kubrick quietly removed an entire scene from the film. It was only 2 minutes long, but it changed the whole story. In the original version shown in New York and Los Angeles during the first week, there was a hospital scene that came right after Jack Torrance froze in the snow. It showed Wendy and Danny recovering from the horrors of the Overlook Hotel. Everything seemed quiet and normal until the hotel manager showed up. Stuart Ullman, the same man who first welcomed Jack to the hotel, visited them in the hospital. He acted like nothing unusual had happened. He told Wendy that nothing strange was found at the Overlook. No blood, no ghosts, not even Jack's body. That last part was especially chilling because we had just seen Jack frozen in the maze. But somehow, in Ullman's version of events, Jack simply vanished. Then, right before leaving, Ullman tossed a yellow ball to Danny, the same one that had lured him to room 237 earlier in the film. That single gesture hinted at something terrifying. Ullman might have been part of the Overlook's evil all along. But that wasn't the only major scene Kubrick cut. Years earlier in the story's timeline, Jack had discovered a strange scrapbook hidden deep in the hotel's basement. He was supposed to be checking the boiler, but instead, he found a white leather book filled with newspaper clippings and photos about the hotel's violent past. There were stories about mob murders, mysterious deaths, and haunting events tied to room 237. As Jack read through it, he started losing track of time. His lips bled from nervous rubbing. The hotel was already getting inside his head. That scrapbook was supposed to be the turning point. Screenwriter Diane Johnson, who co-wrote the script with Kubrick, called it the poisoned gift. She believed it was the moment Jack gave in to the hotel's power. It wasn't just cabin fever or writer's block. It was the hotel taking over. She fought hard to keep that scene in the movie, but Kubrick cut it anyway, and without it, viewers never see the exact moment when Jack fully slips into madness. Still, even though the scrapbook scene was removed, its shadow remains in the final cut. You can clearly see the scrapbook on Jack's desk when Wendy walks in to tell him about the storm. He's flipping through pages filled with old articles, not just typing nonsense. In another scene, after Wendy leaves the room, the scrapbook is suddenly open to a different page, hinting at something strange happening when no one is looking. These little details connect back to the story that was never told on screen. Stanley Kubrick's The Shining is packed with disturbing moments, but nothing hits quite like the scene in room 237. It starts off slow. Jack walks into the room that his son, Danny, had been terrified of. Everything looks strangely calm. The bathroom is quiet, styled in soft green tones with a vintage feel. Then, out of nowhere, a naked woman rises from the bathtub. She's young, attractive, and slowly walks toward Jack. There's no music, just silence and tension. Jack, who's been struggling with his own mind, doesn't pull away. He kisses her. But when he glances at the mirror, everything changes. Her skin begins to rot. She's now a cackling, decaying old corpse. He stumbles back, horrified. But it's already too late. From this moment, Jack's grip on reality is gone. That was the hotel's hook, and he took the bait. This wasn't just about ghosts or jump scares. The scene symbolized something deeper. Jack wasn't just scared. He was tempted. The woman in the tub represented everything he secretly wanted: freedom, pleasure, escape. But when he reached for it, what he got instead was rot and death. The kiss showed how far he'd fallen, and the lie he told Wendy afterward, saying he saw nothing, proved he was now part of the hotel's game. He didn't just see the horror, he accepted it. Later in the film, things get even darker. As Wendy runs through the halls, trying to protect herself and Danny, she opens a door and sees something truly bizarre. A man in a bear suit is performing a sexual act on another man in a tuxedo. It's fast, weird, and completely out of nowhere. Most people blink and miss it, but those few seconds have led to years of debate. Some say it represents the twisted past of the hotel. Others, like film analyst Rob Ager, believe it's far more personal. He connects the bear to Danny, since the boy is seen with bear-themed objects earlier in the movie. In that theory, the man in the bear suit isn't just a ghost. He symbolizes Danny. And the man in the tuxedo? Possibly Jack. If that's true, the scene isn't just creepy. It's a visual hint at something far more horrifying: abuse. Stanley Kubrick was known for being a perfectionist. But during the making of The Shining, that perfectionism took a dark turn, especially for Shelley Duvall. She was only 31 when filming began, and what happened to her on that set would stay with her forever. Kubrick didn't just push her to act scared, he made her live it. He told the cast and crew to avoid her, to isolate her completely. She was surrounded by people but had no one to lean on. Every day she was alone, anxious, and under immense pressure. Kubrick wanted her performance to feel real, so he turned her entire world into the very horror her character was supposed to feel. And it wasn't just emotional pressure. Kubrick made her shoot one scene, a terrified confrontation with a baseball bat, 127 times. That's not a typo. 127 takes. Her hands were torn up from holding the bat. Her hair started falling out. She cried for hours. Sometimes she was so dehydrated she had to stop just to recover. She even said her body began to fight back against what she was doing. Every day, she had to force herself into a panic, real fear, real exhaustion, and it broke her down. The tears on screen weren't fake. She wasn't acting anymore. The final moment in The Shining has puzzled fans for decades. Jack Torrance, played by Jack Nicholson, is seen smiling in a black and white photo from 1921. But the film takes place in the 1980s. How could Jack be in that picture? For over 45 years, no one really knew where the photo came from or what it meant until now. In April 2025, a breakthrough came. A reporter named Arik Toller spent a whole year digging for answers. He worked with a retired British professor named Alistair Spark. Together, they found the original photograph hidden in an old BBC archive. It turns out, the photo is real, but Kubrick added Jack Nicholson's face to it. The man who was originally in the photo was Santos Cassani, a popular jazz dance teacher in 1920s Britain. This discovery finally explained the photo's origin, but the meaning behind it still raised questions. Stanley Kubrick once told a French critic that the photo hints at reincarnation. In other words, Jack had lived at the hotel before, maybe even worked there. That's why characters like the bartender and the ghostly caretaker act like they already know him. In their minds, Jack never left. He was always part of the Overlook. That creepy feeling of déjà vu was no accident. Diane Johnson, who co-wrote the script with Kubrick, gave her own explanation. She said the ending was meant to feel strange, both real and unreal at the same time. Jack wasn't just losing his mind, he was being pulled into a time loop created by the hotel itself. Johnson admitted it's impossible to fully explain, and that's the point. The ending was supposed to feel magical and mysterious, not logical. Interestingly, the photo wasn't just added at the last minute. Johnson said it was always meant to be there, no matter what changes were made to the script. Even when Kubrick played around with darker endings, like Jack killing Danny or Wendy killing Jack, the photo remained. But some important scenes were cut, and that may have made things more confusing than they were meant to be. One of those missing pieces was a scrapbook. In Stephen King's novel, Jack finds a dusty old book filled with newspaper stories about murders and strange events at the Overlook Hotel. Kubrick actually filmed this part. In the scenes that were shot, Jack finds the scrapbook on his desk and later shows it to Wendy. It was meant to explain the hotel's twisted past, but those scenes were removed. The scrapbook only appears for a second in the background, and that's a shame, because it held a lot of clues. It even named the Grady twins, revealed the death of a hotel worker named Tony P. Stead, and had news clippings that might explain the creepy woman in room 237. One article talked about a real-life serial killer who left his victims in bathtubs, just like the one in the film. These details would have helped tie everything together. Diane Johnson later said that cutting the scrapbook scenes made the story harder to follow. Without that context, it's harder to understand what's real and what's not, and it becomes less clear whether Jack is going mad or being taken over by something the hotel has always controlled. When The Shining first hit theaters in 1980, people didn't know what to make of it. You'd think a Stanley Kubrick horror film starring Jack Nicholson would blow everyone away, but the reaction was cold, not just from audiences, but from critics too. And shockingly, the brand new Razzie Awards nominated Kubrick for Worst Director and Shelley Duvall for Worst Actress. Yes, The Shining, now considered one of the greatest horror films ever made, was mocked when it debuted. Back then, the movie only made about $44 million, which wasn't bad, but it wasn't a massive hit either. People were confused by Kubrick's style. They expected jump scares and a fast pace, but instead got a slow, psychological burn that left them unsettled. Even the founders of the Razzies later admitted they didn't understand what Kubrick was doing. They were Stephen King fans and were upset the film didn't follow the book. And when it came to Duvall's performance, they didn't realize just how much Kubrick pushed her during filming. In fact, decades later, the Razzies officially apologized and removed her nomination. Things didn't change overnight, but once home video became popular in the 1990s, people started rewatching The Shining. Slowly, opinions shifted. By the early 2000s, critics who once trashed the film now called it a masterpiece. Roger Ebert even added it to his great movies list. The same film once called a failure was now being taught in film schools. Its influence didn't stop there. Directors like Jordan Peele, Tim Burton, and David Lynch all took inspiration from The Shining. You can see it in the way their movies build tension, play with silence, and mess with your mind. Even Martin Scorsese called it one of the scariest films he's ever seen. The movie's fingerprints are all over modern cinema, not just in horror, but across genres. And the pop culture impact? Unbelievable. That one line, "Here's Johnny," has been spoofed so many times that some people don't even know it came from The Shining. The creepy twins, the REDRUM message, the hallway scenes, and that trippy carpet pattern, these images are everywhere. The 2012 documentary Room 237 showed how deep fans go trying to decode the movie's secrets. Some believe it hints at Native American genocide. Others say Kubrick was confessing to faking the moon landing. Real or not, the theories only added to the film's legend. But there's one person who still isn't a fan: Stephen King. He's made it clear for over 40 years that he hates Kubrick's version. To him, it looks great, but has no soul. He hated how Jack Nicholson's character seemed crazy from the start. He wanted a slow breakdown, not an instant maniac. And he thought Wendy Torrance was turned into a weak, screaming sidekick, not the strong woman he wrote in the book. The disagreement ran so deep that King made his own version in 1997, a mini-series that followed his original story more closely.